All right, my van overview video that was going to be 5 minutes is 20 minutes. So here's a 1-minute overview of my 2019 Mercedes-Benz Sprinter 170 EXT 15-passenger van converted to a weekend camper. I left the ceilings, I left the floors. I just basically added stuff. And here's what we added. It's got 200 amp hours of lithium power under the passenger seat. It's got swivels on the passenger and the driver's seat. Kept in the second row because kids. It's got a kitchen with 7 gallons of water, wastewater also. It's got a floor fan that sucks up air from the ground to cool you down. It's got 4 drawers, cabinets, electric faucet, induction stove, single burner. It's got a truck fridge, and under that is a propane heater with a propane sensor. And it's got beds and couches. And you can see right here, it's one side's folded into the couch mode, other side's down into bed mode. They both fold up, they both fold down. It's got lights in the ceiling. It's got a light over the kitchen. It's got curtains that fold down and have some insulating properties. And it's got a shoe rack in the back and back curtains and a nice little fan light combination back there. So that's the van, and I'll show you the details. Hello, this is my camper van. I wanted to give you a basic tour, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, just a quick overview, and then I'll do a deeper dive with another video into the build process and all that. So my contribution to the camper van conversion community, I think anyway, is using a passenger van and doing a 3-season kind of weekender, maybe a week-long sort of modification. Didn't take out the floor, the ceiling, etc. So it's a pretty basic build. Doesn't break a lot of new ground, but you know, the total package is a little bit unique. So and shout out to our caravan and everybody on Sprinter Source for all the inspiration, ideas, and details. So here's a quick tour. I should tell you what this van actually is. It's a 2019 Sprinter 170 EXT 15-passenger van. So just to get going, remove 3 rows of seats, leaving enough for my family of 4 behind. Start off with the electrical system. So this has got a couple 100 amp hour lithium ion batteries. And I put them in the seat here. It didn't already have the secondary auxiliary battery from the factory, so I had the space to do it in there. And then I haven't seen this done before, but I've kind of mounted the controls right here for the main switch, shore charger, on off, and then the status of the battery, which of course is not a great place to see where your batteries are in the middle of the night. But there is an auxiliary just voltage meter in the back for those purposes. So this just kind of allowed me to keep as much stuff up here as possible, because I didn't take out the ceiling, so there's no overhead storage, and needed to kind of maximize floor space. And then over here, there's a little bit better view of that master on-off switch. And then I can plug in the shore charging right from this point here, and I actually mounted that right on the outside of the seat because there wasn't really room on the inside, and that gives you just a little bit more interior space. Starting with, I guess, the front seat here, I did put in swivels, which does raise it up quite a bit, so I'm not sure if I would do that again. I'm about 6 foot tall, so it's not a big deal, but my wife at more like 5'8", her legs kind of dangle a bit. Okay, so this is and was a 15-passenger vehicle. So we have a couple kids and left that 1 second row in there. And then as you walk in here, used it yet, but this is just a little step here that I'll get out. And here's a step I made out of some extra 80/20 material, and didn't measure it, but it ends up hooking onto the hooks in the back of the seat perfectly. And then just plop it down there. And continue with the electrical system. I'll show you a picture of inside of the driver's compartment here. That's where the charge controller and battery-to-battery charger is. Then I put in a little solar input panel in case I want to bring a solar suitcase. But for now, I don't have any solar, and the only charging is while the van is running or through the shore charger. But that said, good time for a disclaimer. I'm just a guy with a van. I am not an expert, and this video is just for tips and ideas that you might or might not want to use at your own risk. All right, so stepping into it here. First thing you'll notice is something in a globe bag here. This is the toilet, just a freestanding porta potty kind of based unit for emergency purposes only. Then we have here the kitchen unit. Took a lot of inspiration from the 80-20 style design from our caravan. So what you have is a few drawers and one burner induction stove and a sink with a pull down there. And the idea is that because we did put in a van window there, in theory you can kind of stretch this out and maybe do a quick shower off. More likely we would just use that to wash our hair or something like that. So sink and soap dispenser, pretty basic. And then this is the internal water storage. So not a whole lot of water, but again, works fine for weekends. And these are 7-gallon kind of military containers, and then we can fit another different style 7-gallon water under the bed, so we can have a total of at least 15 gallons of water or so. And then down here is the floor fan. So this is from Peekaboo, and it moves a lot of air right from the underneath of the van into the van. Seems to cool it down pretty quickly. So here's the sofa slash bed, and these convert out. All right, so how this converts is just this comes up, and there's 3 legs on each side. We'll just do the one for now. And then a couple cushions that we had custom made out of 4-inch upholstery foam. And that creates your bed platform, and when you do them both, then you end up with about 5 inches of space between the beds, and that just allows us to, my wife and I, to get up if we need to without crawling over the other person. That seems to work pretty well. What we realized though is that 4 inches of foam, at least, especially from my wife's perspective, isn't quite enough. So she got a little topper that I'll show you in a second, but it rolls up on top of this, and it has the sheets kind of built into that. That creates a lot more comfortable sleeping surface. And there it is, fully converted. And if you have thin legs, then you can just kind of barely squeeze through there. And here it is without the cushion on top. This is on 1/2-inch plywood on hinges and just opens up. And then here is a propane box for a standard kind of barbecue size 20-pound propane tank, and then just storage for whatever else that you need to store. So the rest of the tour here, we have a truck fridge right there, which is a pretty low-cost fridge, and it's been pretty nice and quiet and works great. In an 80-20 cabinet, and then it's mounted a little bit higher up off the ground, about 6 inches off the ground, and that's where the propane sensor, and behind there is the Propex propane heater. From a curtain perspective, obviously you need curtains with all these windows to keep the hot sun out and the cold wind out when you need to. My wife built these.
Okay, here's the blinds / curtains I made for the van, and they continue to be a little bit of a work in progress, but they're made out of cotton fabric, some pre-bought edging, and the firmness from the blinds comes from foam board that's cut out. So basically these guys have magnets all around the edges, and they hold up like an accordion, and the magnets are here, so then they just kind of tuck up and hold like that. So we needed to put screws in at the top to make it magnetize a little bit better. There is some metal under the plastic here around the edges, but it wasn't exposed enough for the magnets to stick very well. The type of magnets I use, I found these magnets on the web that are come in bulk packages for name badges, and they're pretty strong and they work pretty well. They're versatile. I use them for a lot of things. There's magnets in here, magnets in all the edges of the curtains, and that's pretty much how it works. So they magnetize along the sides, and the idea with that is that they provide a little bit more insulation. There's also an insulation layer in the back of this behind the cotton as part of the fabric to help insulate the van when it's hot or cold.
You spent a ton of hours on those. And then the rear curtains are different. They're magnetized also, just up at the top there, and they kind of fold down on their own and then magnetize to the side. And gotta love the little horsies there. Then over there is a peekaboo rear fan with light. These are mounted high up, so you can kind of, if you have any issues with cooking exhaust and stuff, and kind of get out. It is a little bit noisy, but it does have a switch there, so you can kind of turn it down. There it is running. So it is a little bit noisy, you can tell. In terms of lights, kind of have a simple LED system that just routed through the ceiling, and in some cases the cords are left exposed. And then the kitchen has one light over there, which is good for cooking. And then those are controlled by this little control center here. So this is just an extra USB light. This is a peekaboo controller for the floor fan, rear light, and rear fan. Then you have a dimmer on the overhead lights, kitchen light, and then a pump for the sink pump. And this little guy here also gives you a voltage readout, so it'll probably be handy when we're doing longer trips and without solar power. Then up above here, you can see the factory air conditioning system, little CO2 smoke detector. And then from the factory, this sucker continued on, I'll show you a picture, all the way to the front of the van. But when you're 6 foot tall with shoes on, your head kind of brushes up against that. So basically ended up taking out a bunch of these panels that made the air conditioning go all the way to the front of the vehicle. A lot of people say that even just the front air conditioning is enough, but didn't want to take out the whole thing and mess with the ceiling and plumbing and all that jazz. Since we don't have any kind of vertical storage, this shoe rack has been pretty handy. That my wife built from cloth and mesh, and just basically screwed into the plastic panel there with probably 8 or 10 screws, but I think it shouldn't have a whole lot of load on it, so it's working pretty well. And we have these hooks up here for bags at night. We can put up our backpacks and duffel bags and stuff. And just in terms of construction of these cabinets, again, used 80/20, made my own brackets for the most part anyway, and then used a lot of 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch plywood. Like for example, this panel right here is just 1/4 inch to keep the weight down. I used the 1 inch by 1 inch 80/20 extrusion, again to keep the weight down, and it seemed like it was strong enough for my purposes. One more key construction aspect is how I use the seat rails from the removed seats to connect the 80/20 benches to. So pretty much all these cabinets are connected to the floor using that kind of bracket for the most part. However, on the fridge, I did end up using a bolt through the floor as well as for the propane tank, just for extra security. And not too exciting, but here's the back of the van. You can see the peekaboo vent there, and then just got a weird ladder. Not so much because I need to go up on the roof right now, but it was pretty low cost, and if I need to clean the roof off or something like that, it's handy to have. Here's what it looks like from the back. In the interest of weight and just simplicity, you can see these bed frames don't have rear doors or drawers or anything, so you can pretty much just slide stuff in there. You can get to it from inside the van as well. There's a little bit of a gap there, so you can open that up and get stuff out. The propane tank or box, which is something you need for safety reasons to make sure if there's a propane leak, the propane goes out the bottom of the van and not into your living space. That took up a lot of space. It wasn't intended to do that, but with the pandemic, I couldn't get an external propane tank that I wanted. And then this is a little fire pit and tiny propane tank that we use just for the fire pit thing, and would take this out of the van before sleeping with it. So the only propane in the van would be inside the box. And like I said, we have a propane detection sensor, so that's kind of important for me too. And you can kind of see how these legs work here. It's just a 1/2-inch plywood with a little bit of aluminum trim for protection. It just kind of keeps the weight down. And if I was maybe a heavier person, I might have used 3/4 inch, but it seems to work okay for our purposes. Okay, of course I'm going to give you a tour of the van when it's nice and clean, and probably the cleanest that it's ever going to be. And again, what we didn't show you, and most people probably don't either, is here's all the bedding and stuff that we'd need to actually make this functional for our family of 4. So here's a big mattress that goes over the front of the seats, and then here's that topper for the back beds that has the sheets, and then blankets rolled up around it. Here's a pink fuzzy carpet for outside the van. We'll park somewhere. And here's the front window curtains that we purchased these, but had to be modified a lot to get them to stick better and be more insulating. So we've been out in a few times, and down into the probably upper 30s in terms of weather. Used the heater several times, and basically our expectations are pretty well aligned with what happened, which is this is not a 4-season van. The window coverings are key to keeping the temperature up, but we can maintain about a 20-degree differential. So if it's 40 outside, it can be 60 in the van, and not use a whole propane tank or anything. I think still only use for a whole night, maybe a fifth of that tank, if that. And the Propex heater is really pretty quiet for what for the type of heat you get and the air blowing. So that's been good. Key is to have the windows, shades kind of flush up against the side of the van when it's cold out, because if you're sleeping right next to that window, you can really feel the cold air coming down that if it's not insulated. So there is some factory insulation in the ceiling. There is, hardly any really. The floor does have a tiny bit of foam, like that big underneath the plastic floor, but this is a kind of plastic honeycomb floor, and so just that alone has some insulative properties, as well as the carpet. So overall, it's about expected that way. Then in terms of charging, we, like I said, don't have solar, but just charges from driving around, and for our weekend trips where we're driving around a bunch, it charges up just fine. It's got the Renogy DC-DC with the solar adapter as well. I think it's a 50 amp charger. It seems to charge at about 45 amps. This is a gas van, so it's got a pretty high output alternator, and haven't seen any sort of issues with that so far. So a little bit about vehicle choice and weight and cost and whatnot. So I've added it all up, kind of kept track of all the different parts and pieces that have gone into this, and I estimate kind of on the high side, probably that I've added about 800 to 900 pounds, including, when the water's full and propane's full. And If you think about though, taking out 3 rows of seats, those are really heavy duty seats. They take 2 people to lift. I think they're could be about 100 pounds each. So I think I've added about 600 pounds to the weight, which for this Sprinter 2500 doesn't have dualies in the back, but does have reinforced front axle and a little bit higher capacity rear axle. Not towing anything, so I think that's well within this van's range. If I was going to get add a lot more water and propane storage and have more weight, then a diesel might make sense. But the gas motor with a 9-speed automatic works great. And